Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. As part of the Remarriage Club series, I have here on the podcast with me, Marcy Kocher. And Marcy is a fellow life coach. She is also divorced and happily remarried. And she works with clients who are smart but stressed, and she helps them create peace. So I want to hear a little more about this because I don't know, sometimes that sounds like me. So Marcy, welcome. Please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate this. Yeah, smart but stressed. Who isn't, right? And yeah, so I really am a general life coach, but I specialize in working with smart but stressed women, and they come to me for lots of different reasons. So
Mhm.
we work on building businesses, or we work on dealing with kids, or we work on marriages or divorces or dating, or lots of different type things. But my ultimate process is teaching them how to manage their brain so that they can create calm.
Mhm.
So I have a 3-step process where we go through calm, and then we go through retraining your brain to work for you instead of against
Mhm.
you. And then once we get really good at that, then we start working on creating what kind of life they really want. But we do it all from a place of peace and ease. I'm an anti-hustle coach, so no stress allowed. And that's what we do.
That sounds incredible. That work is so needed. Okay, and pretty much everyone is raising their hands right now.
I know, me too. And of course, that's my story of coming out of the stress and the overwhelm, and now that I get to help other women do that as well.
Yeah, well, welcome. I really appreciate you being here to tell your story. And we've sort of like dubbed this episode Dating While Romancing Yourself
Hmm.
because you talked a lot about, the work that you did personally on yourself before getting married again. But we'll start with your marriage. Just tell us a little bit about your marriage. You were in a difficult marriage for about 17 years.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I got married young. I was 22, barely 22. My husband and I got married in college. We had all the stresses. We came from very dysfunctional homes. We didn't have any money. We had no clue what we were doing. Turns out we were not very compatible for each other.
Mhm.
But we were Christians, and we had this belief system that you stay married, and
Mm.
even though it was hard the entire time, we both really felt very committed that this is going to work, and we're going to make
Mm.
sure it works no matter what. We had 2 boys during that marriage, and about 16 years into our marriage, my husband had an affair,
Mm.
and he actually left. And even during that time, I still had a belief that it was going to work out, that we'd get through this, that we'd be okay. But it didn't. And
Mhm.
turns out, like, he actually ended the affair and wanted to come back. And we tried counseling and some different things, but just really came to the conclusion that this is
Mm.
not a good thing. And so after 17 years, we ended the marriage. And
Yeah.
honestly, I look back at that now and think that was probably the best thing I've ever done for myself. And it was,
Right. Like, how did that impact your faith? Like, even of the both of you, because you said both of you were Christians and you
mhm,
were committed, and I had that story too, where I was like, oh, divorce is not an option. You
mhm.
gotta, you make it work. And I know this is many women's story as well, especially Christians or women of faith. How did that impact your faith? Like, what changed there to like say, well, I really do want to keep this part of my faith, but it's not working. Like, how did you reconcile the two?
Yeah. I think for me, it wasn't so much reconciling my faith as it was my identity. Like, I
Hmm.
still knew that God loved me and accepted me no matter
Hmm.
what. And if anything, I grew much closer to God because, in a sense, I felt like He was giving me a gift of freedom, and that it really, like, I think I misunderstood that part of the Bible, that says God hates divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And as I dug into it and did a little bit deeper study, what I realized is that really the way that we can interpret that was that he was saying he hated divorce during that context, during that culture, because what was happening was that men were just divorcing their wives for no reason at all. Like they burnt their dinner, and so they would divorce them. And, back during that time of culture, without a man, women, there was no one to take care of them, protect them, provide for them. And women were put in devastating circumstances. And so the way that I relearned what God meant by that was that he hated the violence of divorce back then, that men were able to just leave women in these dire circumstances. So for me, it was just like, okay, God was giving me this gift. He loves me. He loves my ex-husband. He wants us to have good lives. And so I felt okay with it. It did take a while. And it was definitely an identity crisis for me for a while. But as far as my faith goes, I think it strengthened it.
Yeah. It almost sounds like you realize that, the fact that God hates divorce, it doesn't mean that by extension, people should stay in relationships that are destroying them emotionally, physically, mentally, or whatever the issue is that's creating that problem in that relationship. Because I think that's kind of like the what's the word for it? Like the next logical step, or the next logical step from God hates divorce is you can't ever leave a marriage no matter what happens in the marriage.
Yes, exactly. And it was just a deepening and a widening of understanding what God really meant there. Ultimately he loves us and wants us to have, loving, abundant lives.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing. So, you got divorced after 17 years. What were your thoughts about getting married again after your divorce?
It took me a long time to even entertain that thought. Honestly, after my divorce, I was so exhausted. I was a single mom. I was a stay-at-home mom until the divorce. So then I was trying to figure out how to support my two boys. My ex-husband was very challenging. And so there was still a lot of dysfunction going on even after we were divorced that were affecting my kids. And I was really, really just trying to create some stability for them. So the thought of dating or getting married again was just not even in the realm of possibility for me for a good 2 years.
2 years. Wow. And so you said, did you start thinking about it after the 2 years, or what changed?
Yeah, it was funny because my girlfriends, of course, were like, you need to start dating. And I was like, that just sounds so horrible to me. But they kind of started talking me into it. And so
now, were they married or single or?
Yeah, they were married at the time. Yeah. So yeah, I just started entertaining it, but I had incredibly high standards now. I'm sure, after you go through a really hard first marriage, it's like, okay, if this is going to happen again, it's going to be totally different.
100%.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. So you started thinking about getting married. Again, you were open to dating. Did you date online, offline, matchmaker?
Yeah. So I have a story that probably is going to make some people frustrated, but it just was very easy for me. It was something that I wasn't expecting. It ended up being a good friend, someone I had been friends with for 10 years that I had met at church. And honestly, we were just really good friends. And then one day he said he would like to date me. And
now, was he, when you met, he went to this, you stayed at your same church after your divorce? Oh, good for you. Some of us lost our churches in the divorce. And so was he single at church? Was he married and divorced?
Yeah, so he had been married and divorced probably about 5 or 6 years before me. Like his divorce
Okay.
was before me. And he had full custody of his 3 children. And so when I went through my divorce, he was just really a good friend
Mm,
and kind of helped me with my kids and just talking about how incredibly hard it was. And
mhm.
honestly, we were just good friends, and we kind of connected over how to take care of the kids and how to get them through this and what they need and that kind of thing. I never thought of him in a romantic way at all.
And then one day he asked you out.
And then one day he asked me out.
You know, it's interesting. My clients, when they first come to me, are always like, there are no good men out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or some people in my audience who aren't working with me who listen to the podcast. And I'm like, how does this guy sit in your church? A good single dad
Uh-huh.
for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I know.
no one saw him. No one.
Well, it's funny because we had those conversations because, yeah, like I agree. There are very few good men out there. I mean, or at least less than women in a lot of ways. But maybe that's not true. Maybe we just don't see them.
I don't think it's true. Like in my experience now that I've been doing this work and my clients, I have a client who got married 2 days ago. I have
Fun.
a client who she had just the week she started dating, her friend introduced her to a widower who'd been single for like a year and a half. Like my clients meet guys as soon as they get into that energy and into that mode. So I know
Mm-hmm.
that there are plenty of guys out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there were so few guys that they got snapped up, your
Mm-hmm.
husband would have been gone before you
Yeah.
got divorced. My husband was single for 7 years. And this is a man who went to church every Sunday, helped out with the youth group, volunteered, was just that guy who would give you the shirt off his back. 7 years.
Well, it's interesting because when my husband and I talk about it now, I mean, he had really high standards too.
Mm,
And so it wasn't that there weren't women out there who were after him. In fact, a few of them got mad at me when we got engaged.
ouch.
But yes, but it's like he had high standards too. So we were just kind of waiting for each other. We just didn't know it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I love that. I just wanted to highlight that in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that just because it might look like there are no good men out there doesn't mean that there aren't.
Yeah,
Sometimes we
that's
have to open our eyes. Sometimes we have to be willing to believe so that our eyes get opened. And sometimes we
mm-hmm.
just have to be like, numbers wise, there's got to be guys out there. So just need to find them.
Yeah. I think that's a great point that you make. The other part of that was physically, like he was not my quote type, you know.
Mm,
I wasn't physically attracted to him at first. So I never thought about him like that. But
yeah.
once we really started connecting and getting to know each other in a more intimate way, that's when the physical attraction started. So I think
Mm,
for women too, there's a lot of that, like, oh, he doesn't look the way I thought he was going to look,
yes.
and so we don't give him a chance to find out if he is Mr. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Attraction is actually one of the things I work with on my clients with, because sometimes they'll be like, well, I'm just not attracted to him. And I never let them off the hook. Just say, I'm like, why? Let's talk about it. They're like, wait, what? Aren't we just attracted to someone or not attracted to someone? I'm like, well, yeah, you can be attracted to who you want to be attracted to, but are you consciously being attracted or consciously not being attracted? Or is this something that's happening to you from the outside and you're just a helpless victim of your
Mm-hmm.
attraction? So I make them dig deep. I make them sort of examine why they're attracted or not attracted. And some of them find out that, yes, oh, there really is a reason, micro expressions or attitude, or just, this is just not a physical stature that I'm attracted to, but I just make them sit with it for a minute. Or they find out that, oh, wait a second, it's because he doesn't look like George Clooney or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you bring it to your consciousness, you're like, oh, I'm just acting on autopilot. And so I think that word attraction really bears sitting with. And, and for everyone listening, I would say, if you think about what you're attracted to or not attracted to, ask yourself why. It's not so that you can force yourself to be attracted.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so you can be conscious about it.
Totally. There was no forcing once I figured out what an incredible guy he was and his
Yeah.
character. And we had the same shared values and the sense of humor. All that stuff made him attractive to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so and you were also friends for quite a while before he asked you out.
Right. Right.
So did you think, oh, it might ruin the friend? I hear this all the time. It might ruin the friendship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Well, it was funny because the first time he asked me out, he just called and said, "Hey, you want to go get dinner together?" And we had never done that before, but we had gotten lunch together plenty of times. So I thought, I really didn't think it was a date.
Mhm.
So he shows up at my house with flowers. He takes me to a
Flowers.
nice restaurant. He opens the door for me. He pays for my dinner. And we come back to my house and we watch a movie. And in my mind, I'm like, we're a couple of buddies just having a
Oh
nice
my
dinner.
gosh, that's
And
great.
I know I was such a ding dong. And at the end of the night, he says, "I really like you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I like you too." And he's like, "No, I like you." And I was like, "Oh, like I totally didn't get it." And he said to me, he's like, "I would really like to pursue you,
Hmm.
but do you think you're ready for this?" Which I thought was the most romantic thing on the face of the earth, that he was
Yeah.
considering me like that. But I really didn't know. And I told him that I'm not sure. I need to think about it. So the very next day, I'm having lunch with my girlfriends and I say, "Oh my gosh, I think I went on a date with Sam last night." And they're like, "What?" And so, of course, they want all the juicy details. And I tell them, and they're like, "This is great. This is amazing." And I said, "No, this is terrible because of what you just said." I'm like, if I try this and it doesn't work and it ruins our friendship, and if it does work, I end up married, which I didn't really want that at the time either. So it was
Mm.
like lose lose for me.
Hmm.
And but they, of course, talked me off the ledge and said, "Give it a try."
Yeah.
And I did, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. So what if it hadn't worked out?
Oh,
Looking
that's a
at
good.
it, looking back, now you're a coach, you kind of see how our brains take us down these roads. Let's say you had given it a try and it hadn't worked out, you lost the friendship. Would it still have been worth it to give it a try?
Mm, I've never thought about that, but I think yes, because even if it had not have worked out, it was such a great way to enter into dating and learning about
Mm-hmm.
myself. And I was in my 40s. I hadn't dated since I was, you know, 20 years old. And
Yeah.
so all of it was good. It was all necessary.
Yeah. And sometimes I think about like taking those leaps of faith, especially for us women in a midlife, we're in our late 30s, we're in our 40s and 50s, and our brain tricks us into thinking we have something to lose. But what's really happening is that we're at this stage in life where we have the freedom to have these adventures, to take risks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, that's what we say we want. We say we want adventure. We want something to happen. We want someone to ask us out. We want a good guy in our lives. And then when it appears, we're so scared.
Yes.
that
Yes.
we're
So
like,
true.
oh, I got to prepare for retirement and it's not because we're cowards or we're not courageous. It's just that's what the brain does.
Yeah.
The brain is just wants us to stay in the comfort zone. It wants to keep us safe. It wants us to be like, it thinks what we know is what's most safe.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
doesn't really care if we're happy or not.
No. So true. Such a great perspective. Yeah, I never thought about the alternative of what if I hadn't, or what if it
Yeah.
didn't work out. It's a great
Yeah.
question.
Sometimes I think about, there was the first time I separated from my ex-husband and left for 3 days because of his temper and just making the house unsafe. I left for 3 days with my kids and then I came back. And what was interesting was that year, and then after that, I think I stayed for another, 3 years before finally leaving and being like, okay, this is crazy. I can't do this anymore. But my ex-husband, my now husband, got divorced that year. And I thought,
Hmm.
I wonder if I'd stayed gone that year.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have had an extra 3 years, but it wasn't meant to happen that way. But I like to think about it. I guess now that I'm here where I'm at, it's fun to, I don't think about it with regret. I just think about it in terms of like alternate realities. Or
Hmm.
sometimes we talk, I grew up in Nigeria, we'll talk about how if he had just gone on a missionary trip to Nigeria, he would have met me. And then, so
Yes.
we sometimes have fun with some of those like alternate realities. Um, I wanted to ask you, and I know you said, this just kind of happened to you and you were really lucky, but I don't really believe that in the
Yeah,
end.
that's true.
I know that we create our results, like by our thinking and our attitude and just kind of how we live our lives and how we grow.
Hmm.
So I know leading up to your husband asking you out, you had created a situation where you were the woman he wanted to ask out. So tell us a little bit about the work you did on yourself or how you were living life at that time.
Yeah, great point. And I say lucky just because I know that sometimes other people think that I was lucky,
Mm-hmm.
but I agree with you 100% that I did create this result. And a big part of it was learning how to romance myself. And so after my divorce, and I was having really just a time of healing, a time of, downtime, I was really getting to know me again.
Mm.
And you think about when you're dating, and you really like somebody, you just love everything about them, and you just see all these good things. And that's what your brain looks for, all the good things about them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went through a period of time where I was doing that for myself. And I realized that, the 17 years of marriage, I had a lot of very negative thoughts and beliefs about myself.
Mm.
And so I was taking this time to really get to know me again and love me and talk to me differently and treat me differently. And so I did anything from I was putting makeup on for me. I was
Mm-hmm.
dressing for me. I was having dates with me. I was figuring out what I wanted and making choices for my life about what I wanted from this place of love, from this place of abundance, and just really enjoying me. And honestly, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but like I was falling in love with me again,
That's so
or
good.
maybe even for the first time, probably for the first time. Like, just, I was crazy about me.
Yeah.
And
How does that feel? And because I know, like I have my clients, the ones I work with within my practice, and we go deep into all of this stuff. And then sometimes I will talk to someone who isn't a client yet and is, and I'll be like, what are you doing for healing? Or, I'm in a consult call or whatever, or they'll leave a comment on one of my posts and they will say, I'm working on myself or I am loving myself. But
mhm,
from the conversation, I can tell that it doesn't feel like what you are describing to them.
mhm,
It's almost like a cliche. They're using that cliche statement to describe the fact that they're not dating again and they're feeling very closed and isolated. Well, I'm just going to spend some time with myself. But it's more of this like reactive, spend time with myself, protective, like there are walls
yeah.
versus what you're describing, which is almost like you were focused on yourself in a really compassionate, loving way. Can you describe, just for someone who's like, well, I don't know, what does that mean to love myself? What does that
Mhm,
feel? How will I know when I'm doing it?
yeah. Well, two things, right? It's the thoughts that you think about yourself,
Mm,
and those thoughts create feelings of love. I mean, it's really very simple. It's not necessarily easy because it's not what our brains have been trained to do, but it is very simple. And as I was noticing all those negative thoughts and beliefs about me coming up, I was starting to question them. Were they
mm,
really true? Were they really even my beliefs, or were they something that my husband had been saying about me for years? You
so
know,
good.
and I just started questioning and then going, wait a minute, no, that's not who I am. This is who I am. And so then consciously kind of rebutting those thoughts as they would pop up in my head. They still pop up in my head sometimes,
Mhm,
and I just have to tell myself the truth of, no, this is who I am. Just like, with our kids, they come home from school, they have a hard day. They're like, I'm stupid, I'm a loser,
mm,
nobody likes me. what do? We tell them the truth about who they are,
Yeah.
right? So it really is just kind of getting back to our true identity. and
Mhm.
and then those thoughts, those beliefs create that feeling of love, and then that feeling of love drives our actions to put our makeup on or dress nice or go out or stay in or do
Mhm.
whatever it is that feels good to us. And then that good feeling then, you know, creates this cycle. Now we're in a new cycle instead of a vicious cycle of not liking ourselves. We're in this great cycle of loving ourselves and creating the life that we want.
Yeah. Did you ever take yourself out on a date, go to the movies alone?
I did do that one time. That was hard for me.
Yeah.
I have to admit. Also, I'm a total homebody, so I love to stay home. I mean, to me, that's loving myself, is like giving
Mhm.
myself the permission to stay home and just be with me and that kind of thing. I did have a very active social life as far as like girlfriends. I had lots of girlfriends,
Mhm.
and there were lots of times that they were inviting me out that I just said, no, thanks. I want to stay home. I want to give myself this time. I want to rest. I want to relax. I want to work on a project around my house.
Mhm.
It was like for the first time in my life, I got to choose what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And
I
it's
loved it.
yeah, it's sort of like you're creating that relationship with yourself and you can almost see it tangibly. Like, oh, I know what I'm thinking. I'm in touch with what I want. I hear from a lot of women who are divorced that like I've lost myself. I have no idea who I am or what I want or what I want to do with my life. I don't know what my
Mhm.
purpose is. And the whole idea is to take the time to recreate that,
Yes.
rediscover that.
And do it very consciously. Like you get to decide this in a sense, like you're given this gift where a do-over, right? You get to
Hmm.
decide what this next part of your life is going to look like and feel like. And to just do it very consciously instead of just expecting life to happen to you. Like, oh, I hope somebody will come along, or I hope this
Hmm.
will work out. It's like, no, you get to decide what you want and then go out and create it.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that this work is actually work that you continue in a healthy relationship.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
literally, part of the component of a healthy marriage is the ability to know what you're thinking and what you're feeling, the ability to self regulate, the ability to self soothe and to comfort yourself and to love yourself, which frees your partner from
Hmm.
having to like overcompensate for the fact that you don't love yourself.
Completely, totally, 100%. And I feel like that's why my second marriage has been so successful, because my now husband did the exact same thing.
Mm.
Before we came together, we were both at this place where we were really happy individually. And so when we came together, we realized we didn't need each other.
Mm.
We really had learned how to love and take care of ourselves. I didn't need a man to provide. I didn't need a man to protect me. I didn't need a man to validate me and tell me that I was lovable. I was doing all those things for myself. And so, and he was too. And so then when we came together, we realized it was like, we don't need each other. We want each other.
Yes.
And so the relationship was not built out of need. It was built out of abundance, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's so good. Did he ever tell you what it was about you that he admired? Or like, since, like there were other women who were interested and he wasn't interested, what did he ever tell you what made you different?
Hmm. Oh gosh, I'm sure he did. I wonder if I can remember. Well, what's funny is like we've been married for almost 12 years now,
Mm,
and we still tell each other stuff like that all the
yeah.
time. We will still like be watching a movie together and look over at each other and say, "You're my favorite person."
Yeah.
I would not want to be with anyone else right now.
Yeah.
And we just tell each other all the time what we love about each other. Mostly, I mean, I think we realize we have talked about this before, that we realize now how fragile marriage really
Mm,
is. We both had that perspective of divorce isn't an option until it was.
mm-hmm.
And now we realize divorce is an option, and we want to protect our marriage and treat it as the precious gift that it is. And so we're always telling each other how crazy we are about each other now.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So you had two kids from your prior marriage.
Hmm.
Did your husband have children also?
Yes. So he has three and I had two. And so we blended. At the time, the youngest was 10, and the oldest would have been 20, looked like 21.
Wow. So just
And
like, so teenagers you had a whole.
yes, we had lots of teenagers at the same time. Good times.
What was the experience of blending a family like for you? Like, did you think about it ahead of time? How did you prepare for it?
Mhm.
And was it worth it? Because this is one of the things where people are like, oh, I don't know. That sounds hard.
Yes. Well, there were moments that we wondered if it was worth it, but
Uh,
yes, absolutely. We did take it very seriously, especially the ages that they were all at.
mhm.
Um, and so one of the ways we prepared was while we were engaged, which was, it was like 9 or 10 months that we were engaged, and we would have family dinners every week. So while we lived apart, we would
Mhm.
get all the kids together and we would have family dinners once a week to just kind of introduce them to each other, kind of normalize doing
Mhm.
this. It was very weird and awkward at first, and the
Mhm.
kids hated it. And we just persevered. And now it is one of the most fun things we do when we all get together and have dinners. The 5 kids can sit around the table and just we are cracking up so hard. They're all so funny and they love
Mm,
each other and they kid around with each other so much. We can just laugh for
yeah.
hours. So,
Yeah. How did you get yourselves through that? Like, when it was weird and awkward and the kids hated it. Did you
mhm.
have thoughts like, what am I doing to my kids? Or thoughts that this might not change?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Even
Yeah.
after we got married, teenagers go through a lot of hard stuff. Young
Mm,
adults go through a lot of hard stuff. And yeah, I mean, we both had doubts like, oh, did we do the right thing? Would it have been easier on them if we hadn't have gotten married? And of course we questioned all of that. But just as much as we could question, maybe we shouldn't have done this, we could also find lots of evidence for how it was really good for them.
yeah.
And, if it was, life's never going to be like this perfect fairy tale, especially not with
Mhm.
5 teenagers, you know.
Yep.
So, but in the end, I would not have done it any differently. I really wouldn't.
Yeah.
We look back at it now and we're like, wow, look at us now.
Yeah. Have any of the children ever said to you, I'm so glad you did this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They say it all the time. It's
Yeah.
amazing. A couple of years ago, we took a family vacation where we rented a beach house and had all the kids, come. And it was magical. Like we would play all day outside. In the evenings, we'd come together. We all have dinner at this big table, and then we'd play games until late at night. Everybody's
Mhm.
just laughing. And at one point, my husband, we're sitting next to each other at the table, and the kids are all just cutting up. And he looks at me with tears in his eyes. And he said, I can't even say this without crying, but he's like, I feel like my heart could burst right
Oh my
now. And we
goodness.
just tell each other, we're like, it was all so worth it. Like we created this. We created this new family. And yes, it was hard at times. And yes, it was 100% worth it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so, so much. And I just love the possibility that your story brings to so many women. I would often tell my clients when we're working through them creating a vision like the one you just described for themselves, because I help them get to the place where they believe that that vision is possible for them. And I'm like, creating the vision is going to be hard because you didn't experience it necessarily prior. You're
Mm-hmm.
literally building this image out of thin air. And you're
Yes.
building this hope and this sense of possibility out of thin air. And that's what makes it hard, but that's what makes it also possible and likely to happen.
Absolutely. And that brings up a good point. Like when my girlfriends were telling me, "Oh, it's time for you to date."
Mhm.
I couldn't create that vision for myself. I
Mm,
had never experienced a healthy marriage. I didn't come from my parents did not have a healthy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, I had no idea how good marriage could be. And
Yes.
so I didn't even really have that desire for it at first. I was very afraid.
Mm.
And even now I want to pinch myself sometimes because I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't know how good
Yeah.
it could be.
Yes. We don't have a desire for something that we don't know is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so, so much, Marcy, for sharing your story today. I want to ask one last question, which is for all the listeners out there, and everyone listening is going to be at different stages, early in the divorce, post-divorce. I'm never going to get married again, or I've
Mm-hmm.
been dating and what do they call it? I'm striking out 100 times out of 100 on the apps. Like, what's one piece of advice you could give to the listeners just about creating their best post-divorce life, dating and getting married again, something that would let them say, oh yeah, maybe this is for me. Maybe this is possible for me.
Mm. Oh gosh, so many things. The first thing that comes to my mind is like, I'd really say like, focus on what you want instead of what you
Mm,
don't want,
mm,
And so like our brains are trained to look for what we don't want, to look for that danger. But what happens is we end up finding that.
mm,
And so for me, that time that I was romancing myself, I was focusing on what I want. I was focusing on this fairy tale life that I didn't know if it was possible or not. I really was just reaching for the stars. And I was saying, hey, if I have this opportunity to create this next part of my life, this is what I want it to look like. And I would just focus on that and think about it until it feels so good. Like you can feel it in your body,
mhm.
and then that is what would dictate how I lived my life.
That is incredible. I love it. And I know that that really is the answer. That's the answer to everything. You can break that down into the big situations and the little situations, but it really is leaning into that vision and feeling it and experiencing it ahead of time puts us in the place where we get it. Marcy,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your story. Could you please tell the listeners where they can find you? Again, remind us all what you do, who you do it
Mhm.
for, and where we can find you on the internet.
Yes, thank you. Um, so I help smart but stressed women create lives of passion, purpose, and peace. They can find me at my website, which is marcykocher.com. Um, I have an email that goes out on Mondays. It's called Monday Mindset with Marcy. And it's just a value email that if anybody's interested in some of the things like that we're talking about, tips, tools,
Mhm.
strategies for mindset and for creating the life that they want, it goes out every Monday. And I would love for them to go to my website and sign up for that.
Awesome. Well, everyone, Marcy's website will be in the show notes. I believe it's marcykocher.com. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
And that will be in the show notes. Please go sign up for Marcy's email newsletter. Marcy, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it so much. I know the listeners appreciate your story. And for everyone listening, we want to thank you for your time and attention, and we will see you next time.